Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on another exciting adventure into future possibilities. This is Mission Evolution, where we share innovative thoughts and information with today's leading experts, bringing evolutionary solutions to today's unique challenges. Dear audience, you are a very important part of this discussion. Email info@missionevolution.org with any comments or questions, and we'll address them on the very next show. So take notes, sit back, and enjoy. This hour will address what to do when life doesn't go as planned. Create an alchemical experience. If there's something last year has taught us, it's that life is what happens while we're busy making other plans. Looking back to mid-2019, what we expected our lives to look like moving forward to 2020 and beyond is so far from what became our actual experience as to be laughable. All the plans we made based on how life had been became so much dust, leaving many of us reeling and uncertain as what to do next. How do we move forward amidst so much radical change? Is there a way to not only recover, but to evolve as a result of our shattered plans and dreams? Can we use this widespread disruption to create an alchemical outcome? With us this hour to discuss his amazing experience of letting go and letting life is Michael Schauch, author of A Story of Karma, Finding Love and Truth in the Lost Valley of the Himalaya. Michael lives to explore remote places around the world and share the depth and beauty of human connection. With over 20 years of global financial investment experience, Mike brings his business acumen and altruistic heart to help lead and support local and international mentorship, fundraising, and educational initiatives, including the education of girls and student mentorship in Nepal, outdoor youth leadership for those facing barriers to access nature, and holistic Indigenous leadership development in BC. His website, michaelschauch.com. Michael, on behalf of our listeners and myself, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you very much, Gwilda, for having me on the show.
It's a real pleasure. So, what's your educational background, Michael?
Yeah, I started my early education at university in business, actually, but I had no intention to go into business. I was actually wanting to become a creative writer when I was in high school. I thought that's what I was going to be, and so all throughout high school and middle school, creative writing was kind of my best subject. I was good in math too. Math and creative writing were kind of my two top subjects. But when I got into university, I'll never forget the first assignment that I had, and the teacher gave me this assignment of write about a beautiful place that in nature that has touched you deeply. And so I thought, oh wow, this is like the perfect assignment. This is the assignment of my dreams. And I just poured my heart into it. And I'll never forget handing it in, getting the paper back. I was anxious to see what the professor would say. And I got an F on it. I failed.
Whoa.
And yeah, it was totally shocking. And when your heart sometimes goes into palpitations because I'd never failed anything, and especially not in creative writing. That was my best subject. And my teachers in high school used to read my work in front of the class, and oftentimes my grade 12 teacher would tell me to submit my work to publications, and so getting to fail like that was just totally blindsided me. And so I thought, okay, that was kind of the beginning of the end of my interest in taking creative writing in university, because at the same time, a little business that I had started back in high school when I was about 15, 16, has started to take off. It had started to go through the roof, so to speak. And so I decided to kind of shift my lens over to the business faculty. And I thought, okay, what are they doing over there? And the more I looked into the faculty there, the more it was about thinking outside of the box. It was about, here's your blank canvas. You get to create what you want. Whereas I felt in the creative writing program, ironically, in university, it was about kind of putting me in the box. So I thought, I want to hang out with those people over in the business faculty. And so that's where I switched my attention over to that side. things.
Right. So how did you go from there to supporting the education of girls and student mentorship in Nepal, of all places?
Yeah, it's a bit of a story. It happened over time. So my wife Chantal and I, we met in university because of the business program. Actually, Chantal was a classical violinist. She was training to become a classical violinist, and out at the Eastman School in Rochester, New York, and that kind of went sideways because of the psychological almost trauma that they put on the students there at that time. I don't know if they still do that, but she ended up getting like severe performance anxiety because of that, and she decided to switch her. It just kind of took the joy out of the whole playing of the instrument, right? And so she switched her major into business, and so that's where we met. And we, nature and the mountains were kind of a focal point for us. It was a point where we spent a lot of time together. We connected. Not that she was into extreme mountain climbing or anything like that. She was more into hiking at that time, but she gradually got into climbing as well. And so over the years, I remember one day, this was back in 2009, I believe, she came to me, she said, "Hey, Mike, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro." And I thought, wow, okay, that's you don't have to really twist my arm to climb anything, but I thought, okay, let's go do it. And she said, well, because she had been suffering from kind of this anxiety or migraines related to her anxiety, she wanted to do it for a cause bigger than herself. And so we had both been volunteering for this local organization that helped youth get outside and through nature, disadvantaged youth, so youth dealing with some sort of physical or mental barrier, and through nature, that would kind of help them overcome some of these obstacles. So we thought, okay, well, let's put a little team together and raise some money for that charity to help more youth. And this was the first time that I kind of climbed. I've been climbing for over a decade at that point, but this was kind of the first time that I had actually climbed something for a cause, other than myself. There's just other than my own reasons for going out there.
Just get there, right?
Yeah. So we climbed Kilimanjaro and raised some money for this charity. And on the back of that was a great success. So then we went down to Pico de Orizaba down in Mexico, which is actually the third highest mountain in North America. And we put a little team together around that, did the same thing. But in about 13 months, we had raised about $200,000 for this charity. So that's kind of when we turned our attention to Nepal, because through those two expeditions, we ended up meeting a friend almost by chance. And he, when we sat down, he had told us about this little place, and this is all back in 2011. So he told us about this little place called the Lost Valley of Narfu. And the Lost Valley, it's a remote valley in the Nepal Himalaya. It had been closed off to the outside world for generations. At that point, it had just been opened up to the outside world. And I had wanted to go to Nepal for, since I was a teenager, actually, since I was about 15. I don't know what it was, or I didn't know what it was at that time. Something in my very core wanted to be there. I felt almost like a calling, but I never quite knew what I wanted to do there. I knew I didn't want to do something too touristy, so to speak. I wanted to go somewhere off the beaten path. And so when this opportunity came up, when our friend was introducing us to this Lost Valley, I thought, I was looking at some of his pictures, and I thought, wow, this is it. This is where I'm meant to go. And Chantal and I, we kind of looked at each other, and it was kind of a decision in itself. And so that was the opening to us discovering more about the challenges of the children over there, particularly in these high mountain areas.
Let me interrupt you here. When you first saw pictures of the place, and what an opportunity to be one of the first ones to get in there after it's been isolated for so long. So there's still a lot of unpolluted cultural stuff left there. When you first saw the place visually, did you have a visceral response to it?
Well, it was, that's a very interesting question, because I remember getting into this valley, and this valley, it's called a bayul. A bayul is it's Tibetan for sacred valley, and the Dalai Lama himself has said these bayuls are places where the physical and spiritual realms actually coalesce closer together. So I remember going through this one gate, and into it was kind of the entrance into this part of the Lost Valley. And you have to imagine at this point we had been trekking for almost a week. We gained significant elevation. We were up at around 14,000 feet above sea level. We were in these remote mountain areas where you had these sweeping glaciers, these 7,000 meter Himalayan peaks.
Wow.
The people
Now by gate, do you mean a physical gate or a spiritual gate?
Well, that's the thing. I think it was both. It was a physical gate, very prominent physical gate. Probably had stood there for centuries. There was scripture in a beam of wood, just on the above the archway. And I remember asking our guides. We had some Sherpa guides, and I asked them, what does it say? And they said this writing is neither Nepali or Tibetan. They couldn't actually read it, so which was quite fascinating. So, but I remember when we stepped through the gate, and we all felt it. We had a little team there, of 5 of us, and it felt as though we were stepping into an orb, like into another realm of some sort. Colors shifted, sensations deepened. Chantal, she had suffered from a severe migraine attack a couple of days before getting there.
And that altitude, I can imagine.
Oh, yeah. No, it was, and we're out there, right? I mean, it's not like you can just rest or shut out light and sound and that sort of thing. So, and we had to keep moving. So that was a whole nother story in itself, because I thought maybe Chantal and I would have to turn around. And that was right when I was starting my entire body, I could still feel vibrating from the very, from the very place that we were in. And I thought, I was kind of torn between, are we going to have to turn around here? So anyway, we get through this gate, and Chantal, she said to me, Mike, I feel like I had one of the lowest lows of my life, and now I'm feeling like I'm having the highest high of my life. And that was kind of the feeling that we had. I remember one of our other teammates, he's this professor, geomorphology professor, Eric, and he came through the gate. He just started pouring down with tears. He turned to me. He said, I don't deserve to be here. So it was a very, like you said earlier, the area, I think the vibration of the area has not yet, at that time it's changed now. This was back in 2012. At that time, I don't think it had been touched yet. The vibration of the area hadn't been touched yet by the modern world.
And isn't that what we're confronted with now, is possibly transmuting the modern world back to that kind of a vibration?
Yeah, it's something I think about often, because you think about where we're going, and it's almost like everything is speeding up faster and faster and faster, right? We've got more communication. We feel, this is more in the modern world, like more in the Western world, we feel like the pressure to do more, to produce more, and to have more maybe. And it just seems like it's very contrary to this idea of exactly like you say. When we were in that valley with the people there, we spent several days, being with the people, living with them, being with them in their homes. Imagine these little stone homes, single rooms built up, kind of etched up the mountainside, as though these massive peaks were almost squeezing the life out of this place. And yet these people were some of the most hospitable, compassionate people I'd ever met. They'd invite us in, we'd prepare meals together. We couldn't speak each other's languages. They spoke a unique dialect just for that particular area. But we spoke with our eyes. We spoke with other ways. Right?
We're going to have to take a commercial break. But on the other side, I would really like to get up into that communication that you were dealing with there, because I think it's one of our keys, isn't it? However, it is time for that commercial break. Michael and I will return shortly, so don't go away. You're listening to Mission Evolution, coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Hello again. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. To all of our faithful and thoughtful listeners, we really value your opinion and would love to hear from you. What do you think about transforming the unplanned into opportunity? Email me at info@missionevolution.org and give me your thoughts or questions so we can all share them on the next show. Speaking of which, this in from a member of our audience regarding the episode entitled Personal Empowerment During Times of Upheaval. LT shares, if ever there were a time we need solid altruistic leadership, that time is now. This episode gave me the courage to become such a leader. Thanks, LT. So true. It's ultimately up to each of us to lead the way forward. Curious, dear audience? Visit our archives at missionevolution.org. Listen to the episode entitled Personal Empowerment During Times of Upheaval and let us know what you think. Email me at info@missionevolution.org and give me your thoughts or questions, and we will share them on the next show. With us this hour discussing Letting Life Guide Us is Michael Schauch. His website, michaelschauch.com. Now that's MichaelShow.com. Michael, we were just getting into the communicating with the people there without a common language. Would you continue, please?
Yes, absolutely. So, as I was saying, it was just being with the people there. Being able to observe them and learn from them, and kind of we would prepare meals together and eat together. And oftentimes, we'd be in these little stone homes, no bigger than perhaps the size of a traditional North American bedroom or something. But you'd have 20 of us kind of packed into one room with the villagers, and again, we couldn't speak each other's language because of they have this unique dialect in their village, but we would speak with our eyes, and we'd speak with kind of motions and just the vibrations of our voices, perhaps, and all these subtle ways that perhaps we take for granted in our modern world of communication. We tend to be much more in our heads in terms of deciphering or dissecting what we say, the words, the actual words, literally. But in that environment, it was more so about the subtleties, the nuances, the looks, the eyes. So it just brought me right back to some of the more fundamental ways of communicating that we've, I think, kind of lost a little bit in our modern ways.
How do you think that relates to communicating through the heart, dropping into the heart and communicating from there?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, because by feeling the words, by being, the communication, not just sort of expressively through these, these words, I think that brings us much more into feeling, to being, much more sort of heart-centric. And so that, I think, opens up a whole nother level of communication, of connection, human connection as well. And the fact that we were in this place, this Bayul, this sacred valley, where we were naturally kind of feeling this greater openness to our hearts, I think that all was a natural conduit to kind of helping us all connect more closely with each other, but also with ourselves.
How do you think that gate played into shifting you out of the analytical mind into the heart?
Well, yeah, so what happened, I had this idea because I talked about this friend that we had sat down with and was looking through the pictures. And one of the pictures that I came across when we were back in the restaurant in Vancouver trying to plan this trip was this picture of this pyramidal mountain. And that's kind of what really caught my attention, because as a mountaineering fanatic, some mountains, they just speak to me very, very, almost at a very soul level. And so when I saw the picture of this mountain, it was almost like this white pyramid just coming out of the stark and stony earth. And I thought, in a heartbeat, I thought, I have to find this mountain. I have to try and climb it. And so, so when we went to this valley, I found the mountain, and my two Sherpa companions and me, and we spent 2 days of reconnaissance trying to find it. When we found it, I mean, when I saw it in real life, it was the most mind-blowing thing I can ever explain. But it was also at that point where things started to unravel, things started to fall apart. For example, we were caught in a snowstorm at 17,000 feet, and one of my gear bags with my climbing gear, all my climbing gear in it, the mule that was carrying it took off. So things started kind of falling apart, and it sort of forced me to reevaluate these different aspects of who I am. Because since I was 15, I've wanted to climb in the Himalaya, and I thought like that was part of my very identity. That was part of who I thought I was. And now at the very doorstep of being able to fulfill that dream that I've had for so long, I was in my early 30s at that point. That entire dream was starting to fall apart. So it was almost like part of my identity was falling apart. And so I had to kind of ask these questions like, why am I here in the Himalaya? Like, what am I here to do? Is there a deeper reason why I'm here? And it kind of, it almost felt as though everything outside of me was kind of guiding me in a different direction. Everything inside of me was wanting to kind of keep going towards the mountain, but everything outside of me was like, no, it was almost like doorways opening up, kind of that feeling.
Other plans.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We have
like
other plans. And it sounds almost like a shamanic death in a way, in a death to an old identity, a death to old goals, so that you could open up for the guidance you were getting from that magical land. Did you experience it as that?
Yeah, very much so. I didn't understand it at the time, but over time, I actually learned this word very much similar to that, this Tibetan word called the bardo. I don't know if you're familiar with that word.
Absolutely. It's that place between life and death.
Exactly, the place of transition, right? And the Tibetans actually believe that we have many incarnations through, not only from lifetime to lifetime, but actually throughout one lifetime. So, and with every sort of incarnation, part of us, we enter that bardo where we get to choose, which part of us do we want to carry forward into our next incarnation of the same life, and which parts of us no longer serve us, which parts of us do we want to let go of. And so I was actually going through that bardo in the mountains in this Bayul Valley, this sacred valley. I couldn't see it at the time. I think, it's one of those things where when you're so close to something, how you have trouble focusing on it. But after the fact, looking back on it, I was absolutely going through that transitionary state where part of me, so to speak, had actually died up there on the mountain, and part of me was being reborn. Reborn into what? At that time, I didn't know, but I chose to trust in it.
The bardo is usually exemplified by kind of like a life review. What has and hasn't worked? What do you feel good about you did? What don't you feel? Which direction do we go next because this is over? Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, on various levels. There were a few uncanny things that happened. I mean, first of all, the kind of connections that were being formed by me being hunkered down in that village of Fu, which is the most remote outpost. I met some very interesting people who, almost felt like there was some sort of familial connection with. And so, one particular gentleman, his name was Sonam Dorje, he had left the village when he was 14, and he had just come back at that time. He hadn't seen his family or village in 7 years. He had to study, he had to get an education all the way down in India. That was his only option to get education at that time. And so he had just come back. He was 21 then. And our paths happened to cross at that exact moment. And we kind of became friends because I was forced to hunker down there and he was back there visiting his family. And we started taking these daily walks together. And I remember one walk that we had, we kind of passed these 4 elder women sitting against this rock wall. And one of them started looking at me very intensely, and she started firing off something in her own dialect and pointing at me and very intensely. And I thought, I turned to Sonam. I said, what is she saying? And he kind of glanced at me. He said, she's actually saying that you were one of us in your previous life. She's saying that you were actually my grandfather. And just things like that kept happening over and over and over again, like that recognition in different ways, which got me thinking, like, is there some other reason why I'm here? Is there a deeper force kind of calling me? Rather than, perhaps it wasn't the mountain that was calling me to go climb it. Perhaps the mountain was a beacon, this white pyramid beacon calling me back to a place. Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. And the fact that it was pyramid shaped is like,
I know. Yeah.
I'm goosebumping as we speak here.
Me too.
Exactly. Now, tell us a little bit about the team of people that went with you on the expedition.
Yeah. So one of the things that we decided to do when we were early in the planning stage we understood from our friend there that because the valley was now being opened up to the outside world, it was going to be experiencing some unprecedented change. So, social change, cultural change. Because at the time when it was closed off, there was no electricity, there was no access to outside communication, no internet, anything like that, no radio even. So any information that got into the valley would have had to be brought in either from people like us coming in with our smartphones, or from the odd villager perhaps who leaves the village for a time and then comes back, like Sonam Dorje. But other than that, they had not even any books other than some scriptures in the monasteries. So really no information. The whole village was kind of isolated. The whole valley rather was kind of isolated on its own. And so when we were going through these pictures, and when we started understanding that it was going to experience some unprecedented change, we thought, okay, well, let's we're kind of on that precipice of that change, right? So let's put a little team of artists together and try and observe and learn from the people there, and kind of capture a moment in time while we can through this unique time change. So we had a nature artist, biologist. We had a Polish professor who was a photographer, and we had this musician. And then Chantal and I, we were kind of doing some of the filming. So, but it was a very mishmash of a team. It was, if you kind of put us beside each other, we would look like a total mashup. We had, again, like Chantal and I in our trim-fitting sort of climbing wear, this Polish professor. We had this musician who kind of looked like this neo-hippie, and like his blonde hair wrapped in a purple bandana and pointed goatee, and then this cowboy from Calgary, he'd wear this big brown brimmed cowboy hat with a handlebar mustache, and but we were all kind of united and called by this lost valley.
It's amazing how that happens, isn't it? It's like, if you can listen and if you can follow your promptings and what life is telling you, it pulls the most amazing people into your world, doesn't it?
I agree. Yeah. It kind of it's kind of letting go of expectations, right? We set it, because oftentimes we tend to look at life like with a lens, and particularly in our modern world here, we try and come up with a plan for next week or next year or our entire life in some cases. But I think when we let go of those expectations and let go of those sort of plans, so to speak, to a degree, the most beautiful, as you say, the most beautiful people, the most beautiful things can start coming together.
Another synchronicity that I'm picking up here is how both you and your wife had to walk away from the Western idea of artistry, of writing, of performing, of violin, of music, and go into something very analytical, only to emerge and bring back that love for it into the team that you chose. Would you speak to that briefly?
Yeah, no, it is actually, it's a fascinating point, because you think about it, both Chantal and I are very creatively minded. And I think that's why I initially got into creative writing. That's why she went into music. But it's funny because both of those arts were actually, it was kind of the reverse. You'd think that they would kind of promote more creativity, but it was actually the complete opposite. It was actually trying to put structure in place where there was no structure before. Whereas business, as you said, could be perceived as being very analytical, but I found actually the exact opposite of that. It was, both Chantal and I being naturally creative, that's kind of where the innovations were happening. That's kind of where the solutions were being explored, and new boundaries. And, you look at some of the things that we're dealing with right now, whether it's from electric cars to the way we communicate over our smartphones. I mean, all those things came out of this
innovation and artistry.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to have to take another quick pause. We will pick up with this on the other side. Michael and I will return to our very interesting discussion shortly. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution. We're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution. Did you know our entire leading edge, information packed past episode collection is available to listen or download with our compliments? Visit our archives at www.missionevolution.org for our ever growing selection of guests and topics. To find out more about me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the other things that I offer, visit www.findyourpathhome.com. Our guest this hour is Michael Schauch. We're speaking about following the intelligence of life. His website, michaelschauch.com. Michael, you were just getting into the people that you were up there with and how the arts seem to play a very important part of what you were bringing there. How did you come to that? What drove that decision?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a culmination of everything that we had experienced up until that point. So I talked about how Chantal and we had done these kind of fundraising expeditions to Kilimanjaro and to Pico de Orizaba, and which were good, and they kind of raised some funds for that much, that charity that was doing very good work in terms of getting the youth outside. But we kind of noticed that with those two expeditions, we just sort of came together, we climbed a mountain, we raised some money, and then we kind of all went our own separate ways again. And so we thought
we conquered and then we left.
Yeah, it's kind of like this idea of like, okay, well, we had these very deep moments and the kind of life-changing moments, and at the same time, we just sort of all then went back to our daily lives, so to speak. And so so we thought with Nepal, and because Nepal, I think, had been calling me since I was from a very young age, since I was a teenager, I just felt this sense, and Chantal felt it as well, where why don't we try and do something that's not necessarily about fundraising, but let's do something that's kind of much deeper, involving these kind of artistic talents and kind of, learning and observing from these people and sort of looking at that through different lenses, whether it was through music, whether it was through photography, film, art, nature art, and kind of seeing what emerges from that, right? Seeing what emerges from those unique lenses.
It's like you both came, or all of you came, with these unique talents that came together in that magical moment to create something new.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Would you please explain the process of letting go of your original goals and embracing a new direction? I mean, we're all being confronted with that right now.
Exactly. I mean, it was hard. I mean, now that I look back, I can piece together all the different elements and how one thing led to the other, and how it kind of led to this much deeper, fulfilling experience that we can talk about, but of meeting this little girl. But at the time, it felt like a train wreck. I mean, it felt like I was going through this tornado of, why is this happening, and where is this, where are these doorways, these opening doorways kind of leading me, and I felt like the only thing I could choose two things. One is I could choose to continue to force my way forward in terms of what I think should be the way, in terms of what, has traditionally been the way that I've thought, that would be my life path. But, and then the second way was, no, you know what, let go of that. Trust in these unfolding of events. And you don't know where it's going to lead you, but you have to trust that it's going to lead you in the right place. And I think if we look at, one thing I've learned about spending time in nature and the mountains, I think nature we oftentimes think about nature as having a total randomness to it, but it actually doesn't. Everything has its place. Everything has its sequence. Everything happens for a reason in nature, right? Things grow in a particular way, and everything is sort of interconnected to everything else around it. So, and I think that the same thing happens much in the same way for the way we live and our lives, connected in this greater, in a greater way, even though we can't really see it at the time. So, but by tapping into that, and the more we tap into that, the more it becomes easier for us. And I think that's kind of what I was really learning and tapping into when we were out there in this valley.
So you're speaking of nature, and I love that. Of course, it's right up my alley. But how important and what role did actually being very intimate with nature, like you were in such a remote area, what role did that play in your ability of embracing a new direction and actually seeing that that's what was needed?
Yeah, so it was like the whole valley was guiding me, and tapping in, like listening to that opened up the most meaningful, fulfilling experience of my life. So what happened was we had left this little village of Phu. We had gone down to this other little village of Nar, because that's where everything was guiding me. And I would not have I would not have visited that other village of Nar had I tried to force my way and climb the mountain. I just wouldn't have the time. But because we had now more time, we were able to go to visit this other little village. And so in that village, I discovered that there was this little stone school. And everywhere that we were elsewhere in the valley, there were no schools. The kids were just kicking cans around. I understood, in my conversations with Sonam Dorje that, how important outside education was for the kids. Because by the time the kids are 6 or 7 years old, they would have to start working in the fields, very hard labor. It's pure survival out there. By the time some of the girls are 15, 16 at that time, they would start getting married, having children of their own. So that was kind of the life out there. And so when we caught wind that there was this other little school, or this little school in this little village of Nar, I thought, we gotta go visit this. And so we get to the school, and there's an open courtyard, 17 kids. The kids had pulled their benches out to be in the light and the warmth of the sun, because in the classrooms there's no electricity, it's too dark and cold. And so the kids, they kind of had like raggedy clothes unraveling at the sleeves, sunburnt cheeks to the point where they had blisters, snot dripping down from their noses, that sort of thing. But just the most unbelievable scene. And at the head of the class was this little girl, a little 7-year-old girl, teaching English numbers. And that's where everything started to open up in terms of really understanding what this journey was about for me.
How did that little 7-year-old girl end up being the teacher?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So we found the teacher, and he was kind of looming in the back. He comes from a totally different part of Nepal. 2 weeks away, his family, his people are from that place, and he told us that he actually felt like he had been banished to the end of the earth, and so he's not really any desire to teach, and so I think that's part of the reason why this little girl was up there. But she had so much poise, so much confidence, and we had seen hundreds of kids up until that point, each one kind of cuter than the next, but there was something markedly different about this little girl, something kind of connected, is almost as though I felt like there was some sort of a karmic connection between us, and so the kids, funny enough, they caught sight of Michael, our musician, his guitar slung over his shoulder, and they had never seen a guitar before, let alone heard one. And so they kind of, you could tell that they were very eager for him to play some music, right? They have no instruments up there in these places. And so the teacher thought, okay, well, let's get some music going because it would help pass the time as well, I think. So Michael, he's a bit of an entertainer, and he went up there and started teaching these kids this jazzed up rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And I thought, how are these kids going to catch on? But they did, because there were all these melodic twists and whatnot. And then the teacher got motivated. He brought out this Nepali drum, and he wanted the kids one at a time to dance in front of us. And he started with this little girl, this little 7-year-old girl, who was so confidently teaching the numbers before. But then when she was singled out and kind of forced to dance in front of us, which we thought was kind of strange and awkward, you could just sort of see her crumbling from the inside. She started crying, like almost internally crying, and just looked totally petrified. And Chantal, I think something was triggered for Chantal because I mentioned about her performance anxiety and the trauma that she felt when she was younger.
Yeah, of course.
And so when she saw something of herself, up there trying to, being forced to perform again. And so she just marched up there beside this little girl and just started doing her best impression of this traditional Nepali dance. Not that she knew how to do a traditional Nepali dance, but the little girl forgot about everybody watching, focused solely on Chantal, their eyes locked, and this little girl was trying to copy all of Chantal's improvised moves. Meanwhile, Chantal's saying to her, like, no, you teach me. And the two of them, imagine the two of them dancing, almost like these two little spirits in their own world in front of these 7,000 meter peaks. And it felt like time just stopped for a moment. And that's kind of where things, that synchronicity that we talk about, that's kind of when the overlap of things just sort of felt almost like two puzzle pieces being locked into place.
And is there kind of a deja vu feeling about it as well?
Yeah, almost exactly. Almost like, things like, okay, that, like when two things just sort of shift in a way where it just suddenly everything makes sense. And that's kind of what I felt, and I started to feel that in that moment.
Where did that lead you?
So after the kids got out of school, they found where we were staying. this little girl came rushing in and just leaped into Chantal's arms. Chantal told me afterwards that it was the biggest heart-to-heart hug she had ever had from a child.
Oh.
And then the little girl, she turned to me and she just leaped into my arms with the force of, I mean, she was tiny, but it wasn't her physical force, but the force of love that just hit me right in the heart. And I'll never forget her little heartbeat. You know, I felt it in a moment, like right against mine. And her little hands just grabbing the back of my neck. And in that moment, I just felt like, okay, this is the reason why I'm not climbing the mountain. And so that's when Chantal and we started asking all these questions, like, you know, what happens to a little girl? We understood some from Sonam Dorje in terms of, you know, the kids, how tough it was. But we wanted to understand, okay, what is the plan for karma? Like, what's going to happen to this little girl? And so we wanted to meet with her family and her parents and just kind of understand this little girl who's so eager to learn, because all of her friends rushed in and they started asking us for candy and chocolate and whatnot, and we didn't have any. But when they discovered we didn't have any, this little girl came back. She pulled out of her sweater a little card with English words on it, and she just kind of motioned to Chantal, you know, can you speak these words to me? So that's Chantal and I. We just looked at each other like, this is almost a decision in itself. Like, what do we do here, right? I mean, not doing anything is still a decision. So we wanted to understand what's going to happen to this little girl. We understood that we eventually met with her family, like with her mom. Actually, her father was away with the yaks, so he couldn't be there with us. But we were able to find their home and meet with this little. Her name is Karma. We discovered with Karma's mother and some of her family, and we discovered that education for them is the biggest blessing that they could ever hope for and ask for their children, particularly for their girls, because they're girls. And there was a saying that they have up there that we learned, that they'd rather their kids have a pencil in the hand versus a strap around the forehead. Because the Nepalese, if you imagine, you know, that's how they carry the heavy load. I tried carrying a heavy load that way when I was over there. It's very, very hard.
Yes, you have to start very young and develop the muscles in the neck.
That's right. Yeah, it actually changes the whole physiology of your forehead and everything. But yeah. So anyway, their dream was to be able to have their girls educated beyond the village education, because it would give them more choice, right? It would, if they want to come back to the village and live there and have a family there, that's fine, but it should be on their own terms. The family told me at a later date that they just want their girls to be able to dream bigger. You know, if you imagine in the village, they'd never seen a bicycle. As I said, like, all the information that was available had to come in from the outside world. So there were not even any books. It's not like there was a library there where she could just start reading novels and things. Or newspapers or whatever, no access to internet. All of that didn't exist at that time. So they just wanted their girls to be able to dream bigger. And through education outside of the village education, they would be able to have access to that.
Well, we have a little bit of time left in this segment, but one thing I'd like to bring up that we'll probably have to finish on the other side of a commercial break is, okay, there's wonderful things, and we're all big on education on this side of the world, but doesn't that very education, and particularly if you're not careful what you offer, absolutely pollute and destroy the beauty that's there?
Yeah, so that's the question that Chantal and we were kind of struggling with over the course of the next 8 years. You know, because on the one hand, the father actually said to me two things he would like for his children. One was that he would like his girls to never forget where they're from, never forget their dharma, their culture, which I totally agree with, and that was very important to Chantal and me. But the other thing he said was that he wanted the girls to be able to kind of be under our wings, so to speak,
Nice.
so that they could move farther and faster. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, it is time for that commercial break, but we'll pick up on that on the other side because it's a big topic. Michael and I will be back shortly to continue our discussion, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. back. This is Mission Evolution, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I love to hear from our audience. Your thoughts are very important to me. To suggest a topic or guest that you think would be of interest, email us at info@missionevolution.org. I'm sure we'll all enjoy them. To find out more about me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the other things I offer, visit www.findyourpathhome.com. This hour, we're fortunate enough to be sharing thoughts with Michael Schauch. His website, michaelschauch.com. That's Michael, SCHAUCH.com. Michael, we were just getting into introducing education and how you chose to do that, probably all of you chose together, in such a way that it minimizes the distortion that you bring into such a pure environment and at the same time empowers the children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things we discovered from the parents was that, as I mentioned, they really would like their girls to be to have access to this education beyond the village education because that would give them the more choice. So Chantal and I, when we asked Karma, we said, is this something you would like? This is back in 2012 when we were sitting around their little dung-fueled stove in their home. And Karma said she would very much like to have education. And so we thought, okay, for as long as that is the case, we can help and we can work with your parents to try and find the best solution. So when Chantal and I left the village, we thought, oh my goodness, what just happened? We didn't know what to do. We knew enough to know that the school had to be aligned with her culturally because in the mountains, they're actually more Tibetan Buddhist. And so in most of Nepal is actually more Hindu and they operate more on the caste system. So the way that they look at the mountain dwellers, they actually look at them as more indigenous. So they fall on the lower end of the caste. So we knew that if Karma was placed in any school in Nepal, there could be rise for severe racial discrimination. So we thought, okay, the school had to be aligned with her culturally and her ethnicity, and also just again to foster those Tibetan roots, the Buddhism, the Dharma. So we got back to Kathmandu, we couldn't find anything. We got back to Canada. We kept searching for over a month and we're almost losing hope. And then one day, Chantal, late night, she says, Mike, you got to get in here, check this out. And she found this school, SMD school, Sri Mangal School for Himalayan children. It said, for education for the lost children of the Himalaya, the lost children, because these children are so in such far pockets, like where Karma and her little sister Pemba are from, that they just get forgotten about. They just fall through the cracks. And on the picture or on the front page was a picture of kids similar to the kids we had seen at that school in Nar those years ago. So we thought, oh, we gotta check this out. Who founded this school? Well, we found out that it was founded by this Tibetan Lama who had fled Tibet in the 50s, and he had started the school specifically for these kids so that they could get a secular education, but that they would also cultivate their Tibetan roots so that they could then go back perhaps to their village or help their villagers or their people in some ways. So anyway, he started this whole school for that. So we thought this is perfect. We wrote the school at once, and about a week went by. We heard back from the school director, and she said, thank you for connecting and thank you for sharing, beautiful story. But I have to tell you that we have 500 kids at this school right now. We're busting at the seams. We have 400 kids on the wait list. We have kids being dropped off on the stairs that we have to turn away. And because of all this, there's only one person who can admit new kids into this school. And that is this 80-plus-year-old Tibetan Lama, the founder. And I remember reading her note, and I just felt like I was just being dropped down this black abyss or something. Like, why are there so many barriers stacked against this one little girl in this little village way out there in the mountains who just wants to learn? But Chantal had included our email, or our address in the email signature, and the school director said at the very end, she said, "Oh, P.S. By the way, I see that you're in Vancouver in Canada. You may be interested to know that this Tibetan Lama is recovering from an illness right now at his monastery in a place called Richmond, which was a 25-minute drive from our home."
Goodness. Life having its way with you again. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So, all these synchronicities, like I said, I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up. But anyway, we were able to see him, and he wasn't seeing anybody, but we were able to see him. And long story short, he agreed to admit Karma into the school, and and eventually little Pemba got into the school as well. And we've been going back every 8 to 10 months. So this was back in 2012. And so we've been going back every 8 to 10 months over the next 8 years to grow our relationship together, be with Karma and Pemba and their family, their parents, and kind of almost like co-parenting these two little girls, bringing both sides, tradition, modernity, bringing it together. Because again, the modern world is encroaching everywhere around the world as we speak, even into their villages as we speak. And we actually went back there in 2017, and it was just mind-blowing, the changes that had happened. Now they have mobile phone tower, they have access to internet, they have toilet. They didn't have even toilets before. Now they have that. They have more electricity. They have a TV with one station. So the modern world is coming into these places. We can't really stop that, nor I don't think is that the best thing, because with that comes other benefits as well, like improved infrastructure and things like that. Yeah.
What I love is the way that you guys were so mindful to include spirituality and the type of spirituality that these children are indoctrinated into their education. How important do you think that is?
It's hugely important. For example, we actually went back, as I mentioned, in 2017 to have a conversation with the parents, and the parents actually decided they would like the girls, if possible, to have an education and culture exchange. Kids, it's something normal for kids, or more normal for kids in the modern world to have these education exchanges. But they thought, is it possible for their girls to have an education exchange to come to Canada just to see what this part of the world is like? They know the village, they know Kathmandu. Can they see this part of the world too? And so, I thought, let's try. I can't make any promises. To be honest, it took a small miracle to get them student visas to be able to come here. That's a whole nother story. But
it seems like you've been dealing in miracles all along, haven't you?
I mean, life is a miracle, I suppose, if you look at that way.
Sure.
The fact that you and I are even talking here. But yeah, so when the girls were here, there was all these, it's kind of in the details, but very, very important, like you said. For example, I'll just give you a few examples. Karma, she enjoys teaching. So one of the things she did when she was here, the girls were at the Squamish Waldorf School, and sometimes Karma would go into with the kindergarten students to kind of teach them a little bit, or help the kindergarten teacher. And the kindergarten teacher said to me afterwards, she said, just by Karma being in the classroom, the whole vibration of the kids just came down, like just calmed right down. Just by being there.
Heart and nature with her, doesn't she?
Exactly. Yeah. And
yes.
I remember another time we were running around for something. And, by the way, Chantal and I became parents overnight, which is a whole other story.
Challenge, yes.
Yeah. I mean, what these girls taught us, and our minds expanding. But yeah, so I remember one day we were rushing around the house as it is, and we were late for an event or something. And I said, girls, you got to get our shoes, you got to get our jackets on. And I remember little Pemba, she was 10 years old at this time. Little Pemba, she grabbed my arm. She said, Mike, if we were to behave like this in my village, everybody would think that we are sick.
Well, we are, right?
Yeah.
Mike, before we close this segment, I really want to get your take on how you see your experience applying to the drastic change of plans we're all facing at this time, due to COVID-19 and the numerous other challenges that we've encountered in 2020. How can your experience help us bridge our situation?
Well, I think anytime something like this changes or challenges our worldview, or challenges our expectations, it sort of shakes it up. It forces us, or it empowers us, I should say, to go deeper within, to explore, to expand, right? So I think that's what it's doing for us. It's allowing us the opportunity to take what we thought we knew and just shake it up and say, okay, what, like we talked about with the Bardo, or with that sort of that process, that transformation, what do I want to carry forward now? Like, what's going to continue to serve me given the new path? And what no longer serves me, what do I now have the opportunity to let go of as we move forward?
How can we reframe our concepts to help embracing this letting go?
That's an intriguing question. I would say, just from my own experience, it's through the deep human connection with others. I think what I've learned from Karma and Pemba and their family, and just this whole experience, this whole journey into Nepal and into the Himalaya, was the more I I developed these deep human connections with others. Just stop, just listen, just, having that empathetic, compassion. The more, not only the more that I was able to understand them, but the more it actually allowed me to understand myself.
That's huge, isn't it? And you're also working on helping people that don't have the advantage of being connected with nature get that experience. Is that because you see the importance of it in the whole process?
Yeah, I think nature is fundamentally an important. I mean, we are nature, right? So the more we separate ourselves from it, I think the more we kind of remove ourselves from what it means to be human. So I think it's important to kind of find that connection again, even if it's about sitting under a tree for a moment, meditating within that, giving ourselves space. It doesn't have to be like you're out in the wilderness. I think it's just important to find and listen to nature again.
I think you made a really important point there. It's like, if you are already like, the Indigenous people, even in the Canada and the U.S., had these very rigorous vision quests.
Mm-hmm.
But they already lived in nature. So they had to really go to the extreme to be challenged by nature. But some of us just sitting alone under a tree can be a challenge if it's something we've never experienced. How do
Yeah.
you find your entry level?
I think a lot of it again goes back to the very beginning of our conversation about tapping into that feeling, not try to think our way into it, but just to be. And the more we can just be with ourselves, and the more we can just be present in nature. Again, even when I'm out hiking, just on a simple little hike on the trail, I'm not thinking about what I did last week. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing next week. I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing later on that day. I'm just thinking about, how is my foot landing on the root or the rock? Just kind of trying to be totally mindful, totally present in that moment. And I think the more we practice, it's a practice, right? The more we practice that, the more we can kind of unearth that connection again.
And isn't that a heart connection? That deep appreciation for nature gives us the opportunity to have that same appreciation for ourselves and each other.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's because heart, I believe it's our true nature, it's our true self, right? And the more we close that off, the more we remove ourselves from who we actually are. So the more we open that up and practice that and live within that, the more we're actually tapping into who we are as human beings. And I remember I explained some of this story to a friend from the Tahltan Nation, First Nations nation over here in Canada. And he said to me, because I was talking to him about some of these synchronicities and these unique connections and so forth. And he said to me, what are you going to do to honor it? What are you going to do to honor it? And I think
that
that's
gratitude piece.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a question we can all ask ourselves. Like, what are we doing? We're all here. What are we doing to honor these deep heart connections that we have the opportunity to experience?
Beautiful. Well, Michael, unfortunately, we're out of time. I could go on for another hour with you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Gwilda, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And it's been a fantastic conversation here.
It has. Our guest this hour has been Michael Schauch, author of A Story of Karma, Finding Love and Truth in the Lost Valley of the Himalaya. Michael supports local and international mentorship fundraising and educational initiatives, including the education of girls and student mentorship in Nepal, outdoor youth leadership for those facing barriers to access nature, and holistic Indigenous leadership development in BC. His website, michaelschauch.com. Remember, our entire information-packed past episode collection is available for listen or download free of charge. Visit our archives at www.missionevolution.org for our ever-growing selection of guests and topics. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. For more about me, my school, and the evolutionary tools we offer, visit my website, www.findyourpathhome.com. Join us next time as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.